Okay, hello everybody and welcome to How I Read a Chart. This is the second time I'm doing one of these. I don't have the number 2 up there, but this is the second one. And this is basically a step-by-step look into how I find my way into a natal astrology chart. It's one thing when you first study astrology, you have all these pieces, and the goal always is to assemble it into a person. Anybody can do astrology. Computers can do astrology by cookbook, and they give you all these little traits, but then you have to make a human out of them. And that to me is the real art of an astrologer. So this system I came up with is a good way to work your way into a chart sort of holistically, taking everything at once and not overemphasizing one direction or another. This is good if you have a basic idea of signs, planets, aspects, and houses, and then we can see how we put it together. The first time I did this, I did a couple of very kind of basic charts. The two I have today are a little more complex, but the system still works to get you into the chart. Once you're in there, work is always, a little more work is always called for, but this hopefully will get you in there. So I'm going to do the first chart, and then we're going to break for any questions about the first chart, and then we'll do the second chart, etc., and we'll go from there. So the first chart, here we go. We'll just call her J. It is a her, born on the 14th of June, 1942. And without even doing anything, the first thing I noticed right off the bat is there are a mess of planets over in the first and second house. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 planets within 45 degrees. Now, without even knowing what the planets are, the one thing that's going to tell me right off the bat is this is an obsessive person, a very, very focused person. Okay, and it's all below the horizon. So that's kind of interesting too. You would think they're more of an internal person, but here's the first step in what I do. I take my yellow marker and I highlight the ascendant, the moon, and the sun. You get those down right and you're like halfway there, and the rest of it becomes nuance. So we look at the sun and the moon. They're both in Gemini. They're actually conjunct. And that's pretty intense in itself. When a moon and a sun are conjunct, there's really no room for argument. This person's very set in their ways, their emotions and their thoughts and feelings concurred together. But even though all this is in Gemini and there's 5 planets in Gemini buzzing around, she's got Taurus rising. So there's kind of a peaceful quality to her when she presents herself to the world, but inside there's this churning going on. So that much we have, and the sun and the moon are in the second house. So earning a living, making money from it is actually part of what her goal will be at this early stage. And the next thing I do, I take it step by step in. The next thing I do is I indicate all of the conjunctions by circling them with green ink, as you see here. And she has a mess of conjunctions. Let's start over by the ascendant. The Venus is conjunct the ascendant. It's the ruler of the ascendant, and it's in its own sign. So Venus is very happy there. So we have a person up front who's very charming and very stable feeling. This is a Venus in Taurus. She's going to make you feel comfortable to a degree, be very easygoing. You're part of the herd, and things will flow along. But let's keep going counterclockwise. The next thing we come across is Uranus conjunct Saturn in Gemini. This is a pretty good combination. It combines the power of the two of them. Saturn will put the brakes to Uranus when it wants to run off the cliff and see if it can fly. And Uranus will tug Saturn along when it doesn't want to leave the house and keep the door locked. Ideally, these people, Saturn conjunct Uranus, are capable of holding on to the traditions that matter and yet going into the future too, because Uranus is about the future and Saturn is about tradition and structure, but also practicality. Saturn's never stuck in the past. Saturn always wants results. So if the tradition doesn't work, they won't bother. So this is a nice combination, and it's right up front. So even though she's got this Taurus rising, there's this jangly kind of, Uranus and Saturn in Gemini right in the first house. So there's kind of an intense vibe about her. The next 4 planets are kind of an overlapping stellium. If you look at Mercury at 20 degrees Gemini and Jupiter at 0 degrees Cancer, there's over 10 degrees there, and I go with a 7-degree orb on the major aspects. So my thought here is that yes, this Mercury is conjunct the Sun, and Sun is conjunct the Moon, and then the Moon, although it's out of sign, is also conjunct Jupiter. So all four of them kind of get dragged together. Again, potent stuff. Sun conjunct Mercury, somebody, and in Gemini, so Mercury's happy in Gemini. You got an active mind going here. Somebody who thinks, somebody who processes, somebody able to talk about what they are thinking. There's an emotional connection to it. Again, Sun and Moon conjunct make somebody very, I wouldn't even call them willful. They just don't have a lot of guilt. They can be very self-satisfied, very self-motivated, kind of self-centered to a degree, very focused. They tend to resist interference. They kind of put a little barrier around themselves. They know who they are, and you can go away. Jupiter is in Cancer, which adds a certain amount of emotional connection that the Gemini may be lacking. And then we roll a little further down, and at the bottom of the chart, we have Mars conjunct the IC, opposite the midheaven. And then we also have Mars conjunct Pluto. Well, now we've given this woman an extraordinary amount of power. Anybody with Pluto conjunct Mars, get the hell out of their way. They will crush you like the ant that you are if they need to. I'm not saying she would do that, but there's a lot of power here. This woman's got a lot of stamina and a lot of energy deep inside her. Mars conjunct Pluto also gives you a fairly fertile, vital kind of body, a lot of good energy and a lot of pretty good health. So the next thing I do is I add what we consider the positive or the favorable aspects, or the more flowing aspects, which in this case would be trines. And there's only one trine. Again, this whole chart is in less than 120 degrees here. Well, not a little more, about 150 degrees. So it's a very contained chart, one trine. Neptune is trining that Uranus Saturn conjunction. So this is going to add a lot more creativity. I almost feel like Saturn's getting a little ganged up on here, but it's a trine. So the ability to be rebellious, open-minded, thought-provoking, challenging, futuristic, and very creative is very strong in this chart. So that's a positive thing right there. And Neptune is in the 5th house. It's about creative self-expression, and so is her North Node, which is about her. To me, I see the North Node as the direction you go that you will grow the most in life. So that creative self-expression is important to her. And her Mars is in Leo anyway, so when she takes action, she's going to want to be noticed. So, so far, so good. So let's add what I consider the major challenging aspects. I put them in blue. The colors don't matter, but holy cow. Neptune is now squaring 4 planets. So suddenly Neptune has become really important in this chart because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 planets are all aspecting Neptune. That's more than half the chart. And most of them are squares. And that's going to be a bit of a challenge. Probably earlier in life, she may have made mistaken decisions. Neptune may have fuzzed things or fogged things up. But I think the Uranus and Saturn trining Neptune is hopefully helping tame the Neptune and keeping it in control, so to speak, and more focused and misfiring as a square. But still, there will be challenges early on before she learns, ideally, to master the square. So we have somebody here now who's very charming, thinks an awful lot, is very self-regulated, in the sense that the Sun and the Moon are conjunct. They don't take other people's opinions that seriously. Plus, she's got Mars conjunct Pluto. She's going to do what she wants to do. And Uranus is conjunct Saturn, but it's still right up front. So there's this kind of a Aquarian energy to this, kind of a pushing forward, creative, groundbreaking kind of quality to her. So the next thing I do is I pop in the minor aspects, sextiles and quincunxes and stuff, just to see what else we have on the table. So now Neptune's is helped a little more. It's sextiling Mars and Pluto. It's also sextiling the other direction because it's a trine between Uranus and Saturn and Neptune. So the Mars and Pluto are also trining back to Saturn and Uranus. So now we're lessening the square effect a bit. So we have somebody who Mars sextiling Uranus and Saturn, well-controlled, futuristic ideas, willing to move forward with stuff. Neptune is sextiling Mars, so actions are more likely to be, for want of a better term, intuitively and spiritually correct. But again, very self-oriented, so to speak, what she wants to do. I also find with Jupiter in Cancer, there's an added quality of the concern about the human experience. You'll often find issues with Cancer in any kind of medical profession. It's also at the bottom of her chart. It's right on the nadir, even though Mars is at 0 degrees. Leo, the bottom is Cancerian. So we have somebody here whose creative self-expression is important to her, but in a Virgo way. So we're not necessarily talking, if we're talking about the arts, it's going to be very fussy, but it's more likely, I think, with the Virgo energy to be about helping and healing, which is the highest level that Virgo can reach. So now we're looking at what's there, and the next thing I like to do is write down 5 topics. Career, if you look in the upper right, below that is relationships, below that is health, and swinging around clockwise, we have family and we have finances. I make a point, if you're getting into astrology, these are the 5 things everybody wants to know about. So right off the bat, we have ways that we can sort of reorganize the chart into a way that makes up a person and what they do and well, what they're, excuse me. Okay, the cats are screwing up. Sorry about that, people. So career, relationships, health, family, and finances. And then what I do on my chart is I start filling in the details. So let me go 2 further. I want to start with career. If you look up there in the corner, the things I put down under career, well, her midheaven is in Capricorn. So she's going to want to be the authority. She's going to want to be in charge. And she's probably not going to take any steps until she's sure of herself. But almost the entire sign of Aquarius is also in the 10th house. So we're having an authority who is moving into the future, who's moving into the whole Aquarian, serve the world kind of quality. She's already got the Virgo energies serving people. And then we have the other thing we look at in career is Mars, how we take action. It's in Leo. She has to be noticed. It's conjunct Pluto, a very forceful person, not somebody I would want to argue with if she worked for me. As a matter of fact, I would say she should work either by herself, run her own company, or else work for somebody who's in a fairly autonomous position where she makes most of her own decisions, and if she has to report to somebody else, it's not frequent, and she doesn't get a lot of flack about it. So I mentioned that relationships, her 7th house has got Scorpio on the cusp. She's got Venus conjunct the ascendant in Taurus, which is very sweet. Moon's in Gemini, so the emotional connections are kind of very intellectual in a way. So she wants somebody she can talk with and relate to, but a steady relationship. That Taurus, and Venus Taurus is hanging in there, wants to hold on to somebody, wants an earthy kind of relationship. Scorpio, very passionate connection in the 7th house. So there's a passionate person here who wants an intellectual partner. She's also got Pluto conjunct Mars, which certainly revs up the physicality and sexuality of a relationship. And it's in Leo. She's definitely going to have to be noticed. She's not going to be a shrinking violet in any relationship, whether it's a love relationship or an interpersonal relationship of close friends. Now, I almost cut off finances in the upper left. Finances, her sun and moon and Jupiter are all in the 2nd house. She'll make money. She'll make money communications. She's got 3 of the planets in Gemini in the house of finances and house of talents. So she's a gift she has for communications. Um, so right now we have a picture of a person who has to work by herself, wants to work for the public. Things flow very well for her financially, involving communication and some emotional healing. Jupiter is always a social planet, and it's always interested in social issues. So my feeling to her when I first looked at these things was, I thought that I told her, I said, you probably work somewhere in the healthcare industry. And I said, but you either work for yourself or you run your own department and nobody gives you any grief. And what it turns out is she runs a company that helps people get on Medicaid. She helps people adapt to Obamacare. This was a chart from a couple of years ago, obviously, and runs her own business. And she is in charge, and it's exactly what she does. And I'm sorry about that. I mention all this because I was dead on from this mess, and she's obsessive about it. Her business is totally about communicating, reaching people, telling them what their rights are, helping them get enrolled. There's so much Gemini in that. She's got this charm up front, but she's got this buzzing mind going on in the background, and she keeps herself busy. She's run her own company for 35 years now, helping people get their health care and get things they need through various ways, whether it's Obamacare or whatever, Medicaid or Medicare or whatever came before it. So she's really the epitome of that. And I don't want to say she's one note, but she's very focused. You've got, as I said, 7 planets all in one area, and it's about her, because 3 of them are in her first house. And Mars is in Leo, and it's about making money and communications, and that's basically what she does. It's really the main part of her life. She does seem to have a very good marriage. She's obviously the head of her own company. She brings her dogs to work every day. She drives in and she brings her dog in, and she has her office and they hang out with her. So she's definitely in charge. You definitely know it is her company. Why? Mars and Leo. And she knows what she's doing. Capricorn midheaven. So she's very good at running her business. She's gotten a bit frustrated this past year when I updated her chart because, well, Obamacare and Trump care and all that stuff has been going on, and it's been a bit of a struggle, and she's not really sure what comes next. Between you and me, I'll tell you what comes next in the next couple of years is Pluto's going to cross her midheaven along with Saturn and Jupiter in about 2 or 3 years. So I'm expecting their career will go through some sort of evolution and change. And she's been itching for that, actually, when I spoke to her last. So other things in the chart at the bottom, family. We pick up family stuff. We look, I see Mars and Pluto are conjunct the nadir again. So we have kind of a tough childhood. Pluto down there suggests a certain kind of domination in the childhood, so maybe suppression in some way. Mars is down there. She had a rough relationship with her parents, but the moon is conjunct Jupiter. She got along with her mom, even though they fought all the time, and it was a struggle back and forth. Her sun and the moon are square Neptune. She can tend to idolize her parents and get over some of the problems somewhat quickly. So she's got a pretty decent home life. Of course, by now, she was born in 1942. The parents are gone by now, but there is that quality of fondness to her childhood, even though it was a bit tumultuous at times. It was ultimately fairly beneficial to her. Now, health issues. First place I look, there's Libra on the cusp of the 6th house. Okay, that's not telling me a lot right off the bat, but with all that Gemini, watch out for your lungs and your nerves. Okay, particularly because 3 of the planets in Gemini are squaring Neptune. So definitely, particularly with Mercury conjunct the sun, conjunct the moon, lungs. She shouldn't smoke. Generally speaking, sun's conjunct Jupiter, Mars is conjunct Pluto. These are kind of healthy qualities. They kind of invigorate you. Sun and moon are conjunct Jupiter. So that's a very beneficial thing. The biggest issue, I think, for her, other than the nerves and the smoking, is a lot of this is connected directly to Neptune. And so, although I believe everybody should combine traditional medicine with a spiritual connection and a belief system that helps you understand better why you're sick spiritually. So yeah, go to the doctor, take the pills, but also do the work to realize why you've gotten yourself sick. This is something very beneficial for her. She should go to the doctor. She should also meditate and look at what the problems may be, or whatever system she wants to use to examine the spiritual side of it. I do want to again mention creative self-expression. Her company has her name on it. Okay, Mars is in Leo. The North Node in Virgo is in the 5th house of creative self-expression. So she definitely wants to be noticed, and she definitely wants to do it in a way that's with respect. She's not just looking for any, attention. She's got that Capricorn midheaven, and the practical Virgo in the 5th house, and the North Node in the 5th house. The more she proceeds in the direction of the North Node, being the meticulous public healer, so to speak, the more she'll evolve and the more she'll grow and get to understand herself better. So that's basically what I see in her natal chart. The thing that surprises me is everything that's below the horizon, and my tendency is to say, well, I'm surprised you left your house in the morning. But I knew another guy who was the CEO of a company, and he also had all his planets below the surface. However, he would leave work at 4 o'clock and to go home. Nothing could make him stay later because that's where he preferred being. And I do want to say, in a funny way, her bringing her dogs in, she's made her office kind of a home away from home. And she generally has her people handle things for her. She's consulted when things have to change, new programs have to be created, but the day-to-day stuff is things that other people handle, and she can, I guess, stay below the horizon and stay inside herself, so to speak. So that's basically how to get into this chart. And I again picked this one because it's so heavily, it's such a huge stellium, even if it's spread out in the 1st and 2nd house. And I have known other people with these many planets in different areas and different signs, and they have all been obsessive in their own strange way. I knew one guy who had like 5 or 6 planets in Aquarius in the 1st house, born in the early 60s, and there was enough of a Neptune connection that he was a professional artist. And his girlfriend complained that he would go on art binges where he would like paint for like a month and a half and then come out of his room and then go do other things. So this obsessive quality, again, pops up in his particular chart. You see this much together, and as I said, so 9 of the planets are within 45 degrees of a chart. This woman is focused. This woman is energized in a particular direction. She's doing a lot to help the world. The Jupiter conjunct the Sun and the Moon wants her to help and improve social programs. The idealism of Neptune and Virgo, it wants to find a healthy way to heal the world, to help the world. She's open-minded. Saturn conjunct Uranus help her roll things forward in a modern way without rolling over the cliff. Saturn keeps it in control, so it's very focused. The curious thing I find is that the Venus is not making almost any major traditional aspects whatsoever. I mean, there might be semi-septiles and things, but I'm sticking to the basic stuff. So the Venus is kind of interesting. Her charm and her ability to talk to people and connect with them may not be the same. Like once she's met them and dealt with them and gone on her own, a whole different ball game probably happens behind the scenes. But I have never worked with her in her company, so I really can't say what that itself is like. So a pause here. Hold on a second. Pop ahead to a general slide. Any questions about this particular chart? Anything you want to ask, like what you saw or didn't see and where I got things from? Going once, going twice.
I'm curious to know, is she in terms of her physical body, is she a large woman?
Oh yeah. Moon conjunct Jupiter. Yes, she's definitely overweight. You're right. Moon conjunct Jupiter is basically a recipe for being overweight, plus the moon being in Cancer. She's not huge, but she's definitely fairly solid and large.
Okay.
So yeah, that's definitely part of it.
Yeah, I see that quite common with Jupiter in association with the sun as well. So
Hmm.
that's why I just had to ask.
Yeah, and not a problem. As a matter of fact, I'd even say that might be another health issue. If Jupiter's that strong, then you sometimes have somebody overeating. You can sometimes have liver issues or glandular issues due to a bad diet. I don't think she has those issues. It didn't come up. I say the nerves is much stronger. And Jupiter conjunct Sun can also be very positive energy anyway, so it doesn't have to be liver disease or any of those problems. So, um, any other questions about the chart, or because if not, we'll just move on. Okay, here's the next chart. Gentleman I call M. He was born on the 4th of February, 1955. The rest of the data is there. At first glance, nothing in particular stands out to me. There's some sort of spread around a bit. So the next step is highlighting the sun and the moon and the rising sign. Now here we have some difference. At least we have the sun is in Aquarius, so we're going to have somebody who, and it's in the house of Aquarius, you know, it's in the 11th house. So there's this obviously open-minded thinking kind of quality. There's a bit of a cool quality to Aquarians. I'm not saying they're cold, but they're not gushy kind of people necessarily. But then we go down to his moon, and it's at 13 degrees Cancer on the nadir. So this guy's got a lot of emotions. They may not be right up front, but there's a strong Cancerian moon right at the bottom of the chart. Much like our previous person, he probably likes to be home with the moon down there. Although home, well, we'll get into the conjunction down there in a minute. The other thing is he's got our Aries rising. So we have somebody who's fairly direct and forceful and maybe even somebody who starts fights, perhaps. You know, Aries rising is very direct. Aquarius can be a little cold and you know, I think there's somebody that's kind of maybe got their dukes up. And when we go to the conjunctions, he sure does. He's got Mars conjunct his ascendant. So ironically, much like the previous chart, I didn't consciously pick this, but the ruler of his rising sign is also in its rulership itself. So Mars is in Aries, floating right above the ascendant. So this is like a double kind of Aries energy right up front. Very direct, right to the point, and you know, kind of pushing it all the time when he meets people. You might even kind of maybe lean back when you meet him, as in like, okay, hi, how you doing? This energy's right up front. The other thing is at the bottom, we have the moon in Cancer, very happily in Cancer. Its rulership also conjunct the nadir, which is also the house of Cancer. So mom might have been fairly important to him, but then we roll over to the next conjunction. We've got Jupiter conjunct Uranus in Cancer, both going retro in the 4th house. This sounds like a chaotic childhood just based on this. Because instead of in the previous chart, we had Saturn conjunct Uranus. Here we have Jupiter conjunct Uranus. So it's kind of saying, you go, Uranus, you leap off that cliff, you go for that crazy idea. But this is all happening in the deepest house of who he is. So I'm suspecting childhood was a bit disruptive. There may have been some benefits to it because it's in Jupiter, but still, that's a lot of craziness, particularly for somebody whose moon is down there and is probably looking to have a home he can retreat to, but Jupiter and Uranus kind of give him a rough time with that. So the next thing I do, as I mentioned, is I now ink in the harmonious aspects. And he has a few, and they're very nice. He's got Mercury trining Neptune, which has got a very good creative mind. His Mercury is in Aquarius. So again, that's adding to his forward thinking. Neptune is bringing a certain amount of intuitive creativity to that. So he's kind of becoming more Uranian in some ways because there's Aquarius energy with some Neptune backing up. I do want to point out that, and this is interesting, Venus at 28 degrees Sag is trining Pluto, So now we're having somebody who's probably very good at relating to other people, not on a shallow level. Pluto's saying, even though the Venus is in Sag, he's not interested in light conversation necessarily, or light connections. He goes right to the Pluto, and he wants like tight relationships, tight, close friendships, and really wants to be understood by other people. And finally, we have Saturn, due to the fact that it's sort of in the middle between the two. It is trining the Moon and Uranus and Jupiter all at the same time, and that's also quite helpful. It'll perhaps rein in some of that craziness down in the of the Jupiter and Uranus in Cancer in the fourth, and it'll probably help rein in some of the emotions in the Moon, because we know that a Moon in Cancer is extremely emotional, and he is a man, and at this point in our society and our culture, a Cancer Sun or a Cancer Moon can be difficult for men to deal with, due to our culture. I think men and women are quite capable of. Women are capable of being rough and tough, and men are quite capable of being loving and sweet and supportive. But we don't have a society that encourages that necessarily. It's getting better, though. So still has a strong emotional heart, still very analytical, but creative. Neptune trining the Mercury. And well, that Venus trine Pluto, deep relationships. He can actually take love to a deeper level when he does get into a relationship. So let's add the hard, challenging aspects. Okay, we got a few here. Well, let's start with what I call the skewed T-square. He's got Mercury at 29 degrees opposite Pluto. So you're going to have somebody who's kind of a mentally challenging person. This is a person who might even want his ideas to dominate other people, or he could let other ideas dominate him. But Pluto is also squaring Saturn, and that's pretty potent stuff. There could be some rigidity there. This is a person that will be very hard to change from their belief systems. Pluto trining Saturn would have been a lot healthier, but it's a square, and so there's a real kind of rigidity, and they're both in fixed signs. And it's a Saturn in Scorpio, which, as passionate as it can be, sometimes it can be prone to crystallization almost, so to speak. And the skewed T-square brings Saturn to square the Sun. So now we have somebody even more drawn back. Saturn square the Sun is going to pull somebody back. It's almost a little like having some Capricorn in your chart. So that Aquarian Sun, which is already kind of cool a little bit, is adding the Saturn square, which is saying that he probably doesn't volunteer what he needs to share, even when it's good for him, unless he learns otherwise. So we have this, again, a skewed T-square, because Saturn is sitting between the Pluto at 25 and the Sun at 15. So it's not actually a complete T-square, but it is there giving those particular issues. I look over to Mars, and uh-oh, we have Mars squaring the Moon. So boy, is he going to have a temper. He's more likely, his first emotional reaction to many things, and he will have emotional reactions, he's got a Moon in Cancer, will be anger, will be defiance, will be kind of this Mars quality right up front, you know, potentially bullying, okay? And the other difficult aspect is Neptune is now squaring Uranus and Jupiter. I do want to mention people born roughly from 1952 to about 1955 all have Neptune squaring Uranus. And Neptune squaring Uranus is about being a rebel, and I have it in my chart. People with Neptune square Uranus will rebel against anything. Even if they disagree with it, they rebel, they fight, they argue. It's like, no. And I've had to learn over my life to pick my fights, because you can't rebel against everything. And he's going to have a struggle with that, because Neptune is also squaring the Jupiter. So in his case, it's kind of revving up that rebelliousness. And so a quick wrap up, we have a guy who's somewhat cold out front, somewhat aggressive out front, although deep inside there's a very strong emotional quality. Deep inside, Moon is trining Saturn. Deep inside, he's got Mercury conjuncting Neptune. He's got Pluto trining, excuse me, Mercury trining Neptune, and Venus trining Pluto. So you got these beneficial things inside, but I think he's going to have more trouble out front. He also has Mercury, Capricorn, God, my brain, Capricorn on the midheaven. He's also got his North Node at 5 degrees Capricorn on the midheaven. So he's going to be a public person in some way. He's going to be career oriented, and he's going to want to be an authority. So now we've got even more of a reason he's going to think the world of himself and not want to share things. Nothing like Capricorn energy to feel that they don't have to answer to anybody and they know everything. and I'm a Capricorn, so. Okay, let's add the minor aspects. This is helping soften it, and I'm happy to see these. Now we have Mars sextiling the sun, so hopefully that'll soften the square to the moon. We have Mercury sextiling Venus, and then Venus sextiling Neptune. So there's an ability to communicate in a clear way whenever Venus and Mercury connect like that in a harmonious way. The ability to communicate, the silver tongue can come out. He's able to speak and make sense out of it. And Venus sextiling Neptune certainly helps him become more empathetic if he wants to use it. I say if he wants to use it because sextiles kind of have to be pushed a little bit to get him to come out. And finally, like almost everybody from like 1940 onwards, he has Neptune sextile Pluto. But the other thing that stands out to me is there's a quincunx or an inconjunct from the moon to the sun, 2-degree orb, and a little less actually than 2 degrees. And this is a tough one. Inconjunct, the planets, excuse me a second, I'll look for my piece of paper here. The planets are often connected to each other, but have no understanding of each other whatsoever. They don't even speak the same language. And that can be a problem because they're still connected to each other. It's like you chain together somebody that spoke Chinese to somebody that spoke Urdu, and they're stuck with each other, but they can't communicate. And I mention this partially because this is pointing us back to his mom and dad again, sun and moon. Mom and dad are not connected to each other. I mean, they're connected, they're married, but he doesn't even see them as remotely connected to each other. He's also got problems down in the 4th house with his family, struggles growing up. He's got sun squaring Saturn, so we're talking father issues. He's got moon squaring Mars. He's got mother issues, and none of them particularly pleasant. Maybe a little better with mom because at least Saturn's coming into trine the moon, but the parents are a hassle. I do want to mention when I met this person, I was aware that he was actually fairly spiritually oriented. He meditated. He tried to work his stuff through, but he did have a lot of frustrations. So the next step becomes moving to the 5 topics that I talk about, and we go up to career. And we have, again, Capricorn midheaven. He's got to be the authority. His North Node is on his midheaven. The more he pursues a public persona, the more out there he gets in terms of becoming the head of a business or being having a career or having some presence and being known will make him evolve. But in this case, it's the exact opposite of all that stuff in Cancer at the bottom. So he's going to probably want to stay home more than go to the direction of his North Node. His South Node is down on the nadir, and it's saying, hey, let's go home. We know how to do this. You know, South Node is what you already know how to do. So he may resist going out there. He may pull back when he should step forward, even with Mars on the ascendant. Now, I will say Mars in Aries in the 1st house, well, Mars in Aries in the ascendant certainly gives him a tremendous amount of energy, a person who's in constant motion. He may be somebody that takes too many risks, particularly because it's squaring his moon. He can be very courageous. He can also be very pushy. I don't know if he's necessarily a bully, but he is strong-armed, and again, we also have that Pluto trining Venus, so he's quite capable of kind of dominating other people. It's a trine kind of in a pleasant way, except that Mars up front, he's got his fists out, so to speak. He may have some self-discipline issues with all that energy, But once he's focused, he can probably get a lot done. Once you focus to Mars in Aries, they'll just plow through stuff and get it done. But he will have a bit of a short fuse. And the other thing I want to mention while we're talking about career and interrelations with people is the Sun quincunx or inconjunct the Moon is talking about somebody who yields too much to other people. Okay. He can complicate his life through the other demands of other people. So his sense of self and emotional connections are not always clearly flowing smoothly. It's very important for this person to try to owe no one, not to have any responsibilities. He needs to, because he's kind of a sucker for any tale of woe or any quality of concern about somebody else. So that's an issue that goes on in his life, primarily from that inconjunct. I mean, he's got that held back quality, Sun Saturn square. He's got that aggressive quality, Mars on the ascendant squaring the Moon, and but he's also got that Mercury opposite Pluto, which is adding a lot of intellectual domination. Necessarily is a form of what we could call it. So let's roll into relationships, and this is a challenge. He has the Moon in Cancer. It's squaring Mars. He has potentially issues with mom and issues with women, issues with his emotions. Meanwhile, when I look at relationships, I go over to his 7th house. He's got Neptune. And so he's looking for idealized relationships, because that's Neptune will do that. The dream relationships, looking for your knight in shining armor, or your sleeping beauty, your princess, or whatever it is. You're looking for an ideal relationship. He definitely wants one because he's got his Venus trining Pluto. He wants an ideal relationship that he can get into and sink into deep and get to the really deeper levels of what's going on in relationships. He can be or should be fairly tolerant with Venus in Sagittarius, but it's trining Pluto, and Pluto can be kind of a strong arm quality. Meanwhile, he also has Saturn in his 7th house, so he's got this quality of like relationships coming later in life, looking for people that are established, people that are not flaky, people that are not weird, although he's capable of handling weirdness, because Saturn is trining Uranus and Jupiter down there, but it's also squaring the Sun. So relationships are difficult for him. And it's a funny thing. When I was talking to him, he told me his last relationship was 17 years earlier. Now, this guy is 60, what is it, 62, 63. That means his last relationship was in his mid-40s. And he started volunteering that he didn't get along with people that well, and that he would cut people off the minute they didn't give him exactly what he wanted. Same thing with business. He had a lot of trouble in business because he knew better. And look, I'll give him the odds. He probably did know a lot better, but he was very impatient with other people. And that Saturn squaring the Sun will keep people at arm's length, which is a struggle when you're trying to work with them. He eventually worked for other people, but became a freelance, I believe, contractor of some kind, because he really couldn't cooperate on a regular basis with the same people, because he was sometimes always judging them. And sometimes he'd give them the Mars right up front, and sometimes he'd just do the Saturn square the Sun and say, I'm out of here. I don't need this shit. So that's the challenge there that he needs to get over. And I did actually talk to him about it. And I said, people can bring you things that you don't have on your own. And I'm saying, I'm not saying you have to listen to other people. After all, we have this Sun quincunxing the Moons. There's this tendency to overcommit when they do get involved with the people. Perhaps he's just protecting himself by holding back. But I said, you got to find a middle ground there. Otherwise, you're creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. By avoiding people and not letting them open up to you and not letting them be themselves, by just cutting them off and saying, well, I don't need this crap, you're never going to learn from other people. And if you're never learning from other people, then you're probably never learning a lot, because people can bring you a lot of things that books and other learning can't. Okay. So let's head down to his family. We have there's the Moon on the nadir in Cancer, squaring Mars, so we know mom is a problem. Jupiter and Uranus are in Cancer in the 4th house, so there's kind of a disruptive quality to his childhood. Sun quincunx in conjunct the moon. Mom and dad are just not even on the same planet. And he's got Sun square Saturn, so dad is a problem. So I said, hey, how is your relationship with your parents? And he says, oh, it's great. They're dead. And he meant that, okay? That was what he actually said. He said, now that they're dead, I'd get along with them fine. So I don't know if he's made any peace with them yet or not. But this is obviously going to give him some issues when he's trying to relate to other people. If his solution to mom and dad is they're gone, well, that's the same solution he's been applying to everything. You're a pain in the ass, goodbye. I don't get along with you, goodbye. This relationship is a hassle, goodbye. He's constantly pulling away. So it's not just the Saturn square the sun, but you've got these planets down in the 4th house, 3 of them, that he wants to go home. He wants to go home and close the door and tell everybody to go to hell. And if they're going to give him a hard time, well, he's going to take that Mars in the 1st house and just, punch him in the nose and say, get the hell out of here, and not give people a chance. And he acknowledged this. He actually understood that. And he said he did want to try to get to a place where he would listen to people. And I told him, I said, you can listen to people without getting sucked in. There's a middle ground somewhere. I pointed out he's got, again, the strengths are in the chart to overcome the difficult aspects. He's got Venus trine Pluto. He should be able to get along with people. He should be able to read them pretty well, too. He's got Neptune trining Mercury. He's open-minded. He's got the trine from Saturn down to the moon. So there's sort of a control he can create in a harmonious way over his 4th house stuff. So the biggest issue sometimes, with Neptune in the 7th house, this is what kind of makes him a bit of a sucker for other people, because where Neptune turns up, you can be very idealistic. Now, our previous chart, she was able to turn that into a career, but here, what's happening is it almost becomes a Pisces-like quality. When you are idealistic about other people, you see them in their purest light. Okay, and at the core of every one of us on this planet is a pure, holy, sacred soul, whatever you want to call it, in this physical body. And the problem with people, the Pisces people, and Neptune in the 7th house kind of people, or conjunct Venus, is they see the idealized person. They don't see what's right in front of them. That's the tricky part of Neptune. So what happens is, as an example, and I'm not saying this is true in his case, but you might see this person, you go like, oh, I can tell he's a poet. He could write such great books. He's a really wonderful person, except that right now he's an alcoholic and hasn't tried to get into an AA program. He wants to be an alcoholic, so to speak. Well, the Neptune Pisces kind of people will see past that and go, oh, but he's wonderful inside. And it's like, okay, he may be, or she may be, if it's a woman, but that doesn't mean it's who they are now. And so you get tangled up with somebody that you can't fix and you can't help, but you still see the pure quality inside him, the other person. And that's the point I tried to make to him. You can open up to people without opening the door wide and locking it in the open position. There are ways to protect himself. And I said he knows how to protect himself. He's got Saturn squaring the sun, and it may be a difficult kind of a combination, like Saturn squaring Pluto, but believe me, he can put a wall up when he has to. So I said, open the door a little bit. It's kind of like Superman afraid that they're going to shoot him with a bullet. It's like, dude, you got the ability to protect yourself. And I tried to encourage him not to live in fear of other people and what they can bring up. And he acknowledged it. He even kind of said, he realizes he's been doing that, but nobody ever said that to him before. So, hey, the astrologer said that to him, and that's what happened. Health-wise and finance-wise. Finances is not a lot in the 2nd house, Taurus and Gemini. He does have a moon in Cancer. They tend to be thrifty. They tend to be a little erratic with their finances because the moon can wobble back and forth. But they do want to, Cancers like to accumulate money for security's sake. So that quality is there, and he's made his living, but he does struggle a little bit because he's a freelancer, so his money does go back and forth. And finally, health issues. Got a big 6th house. There's nothing in it. I will say moon squaring Mars, you're talking stomach issues, you're talking ulcers, you're talking somebody who, or potential ulcers. I always want to say when I'm talking about health issues, it's always potential health issues. So stomach upsets, he probably, Isabel Hickey refers to Mars square the moon as a red stomach, kind of an acidy stomach, one that's liable to get upset. I told him, which is standard for this kind of a connection, don't eat when you're upset, pace yourself. And I also noticed he's got Saturn in Scorpio, and because it's a fixed sign and it's a passionate one, Saturn can be connected to arthritis. It can be connected to rigidity. And if it's in a passionate fixed sign, he's got this kind of passionate rigidity. So sometimes there can be health issues with that kind of a combination. And I'm going to say particularly because it's squaring the sun and Pluto. He may have issues with mobility down the road. He may have issues with arthritis, anything that's going to stiffen him or crystallize him in some way and prevent him from moving forward will be part of the problem for him. So I think I've covered his chart. So let me just, there's my commercial. But in the meanwhile, I'm done with the second chart. We have a few minutes. Are there any questions about how I looked at the chart, how I got into it, why I drew the conclusions I did? Fire away.
I just find it kind of fascinating, the way that you look at the chart. Now, evolutionary astrology, we kind of look at the chart a little bit different, but you were coming
Whoa.
to the same conclusion and
Okay.
answering the questions that I had as you were talking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Um, I look at this, my way of getting to a chart is I'm trying to take the whole chart into consideration at once. The biggest issue I have, I find a lot of people have when they get into astrology, is they start making people a collection of ticks and traits. And that's not what we are. We're more than the sum of our traits. And I like my system because it helps you get in, kind of pulling it from every direction. You're not just saying, oh, look at this over here, look at this over here, but we're trying to balance it out and see the big picture. Which to me is that's the art of the astrologer, to put it together into a cohesive whole, into a person, as opposed to well, when he's with his mother he does this, when he's with his father he does that. They all have the same base motivation, and once I realized career, relationships, health, family, and finances are the concerns of people, it was a little easier to kind of carve up the chart a bit and pull out those planets and situations that applied specifically to those topics, and help work it out. And there's overlapping, the relationships. Moon square Mars is a hassle. Well, so is it in your family when with your mom. So there's always, and it's the health. So in 3 different places I put Moon square Mars, but each one, it applied to relationship, it applied to health, and it applied to family, which is why I was trying to find a system that kind of pulled everything in at once. So it's we still have about 6 minutes left, I believe. So any curiosity, any questions, I'm welcome to answer them.
Does anybody else have any questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
Hi, yeah, thanks for delineating the chart. It's really good. So with a difficult chart like this, how, obviously this guy, doesn't want to do anything. How do you, how would you, how could you help this person?
Well, okay.
What would you do, I guess, to try to, have him find solutions to the difficulties?
Well, first, the benefit of every astrologer is the person comes to you. So they're already looking for some kind of an answer to something. They may not even know what it is, but they're seeking an answer. In this case, it's kind of funny. He was recommended to me. The first date we made to do the reading fell through. Then he said he was kind of broke and he was going to do the reading. And I just trusted my gut instinct, because I said, we'll do the reading. You can pay me whenever you have the money. And we did. And he actually liked the reading so much, he paid me right away. But he came to me, and at this age, he's like 62, 63, he's getting frustrated. I mean, he meditates, he tries to do things, but he didn't understand what the problem was. And in this particular chart, he was seeing the problem in other people. And we all know that's never where the problem is. And so for me, by talking to him about how he related to people and how his first response was to run away, to be angry or run away, I tried to suggest there's other answers to things. You know, the first thing I said with the Mars right up front is like, you've got to take a deep breath. You can't just plunge right in all the time. I said, that's a great thing to have when you're ready to start a project. It's not a great thing to have when you're having a discussion with somebody, because you're going to just, you know, punch him out and run away. And so he was looking for more out of his life. So again, the other thing I said is you've got to give people room to be who they are, to give them a chance to speak who they are without getting sucked in. So a lot of this is self-worth. I said, hey, you may want to dig into your parents. We can also point out Pluto right now is about 20 degrees. It's going to get right on that Jupiter and Uranus in the next year or two. So he's going to have some challenges. And a few years ago, it hit the moon at 13 degrees. So he's actually been, once Pluto got down there, beginning to question what's going on and what the hassles is. I wrote down what happened when Pluto hit his moon, but I can't find it at the moment. My apologies. But so there's been some upheaval. And I think the break between the two, and Pluto's between Jupiter and the moon, is when he started looking for some kind of an answer. And so I found that's, since he was looking for an answer, I could tell him, you know, don't dominate other people, listen to other people. You may still do it your way anyway. I said, but you never know. Somebody can throw you a nugget. And he's open-minded enough that he began to see it that way. Remember, he's got Neptune trining Mercury. He's got Venus trining Pluto. He can connect to other people, and he can be open-minded when he can override that Saturn square the sun. And that's kind of what I told him. I always joke that when I look at a lot of the difficult aspects, I look for the escape route. And in this case, the escape route are all these trines and sextiles. Yeah, it's a hassle. He's got a skewed T-square. He's got this square to Mars. But there's all these trines that are not obviously his first instinct. Remember, I'm sure most of you know, squares kind of, and oppositions happen. Trines are kind of passive, and sextiles even more so. So you can override them. They can just not do anything because some astrologers refer to, I think, trines as almost lazy, you know. So you really have to be aware that you've got these other gifts. And that's kind of what I talked to him about. I tried to explain, you got Saturn trining your moon, you're protected. You know, you can keep people, if not at arm's length, at least you don't have to get sucked in. You don't have to take that Neptune square Jupiter and go for the ride into the 7th house and surrender who you are. And his only solution to not surrendering himself is to run away. And I said, there's a middle ground. And I pointed out, you've got the strength in this chart to do that if you let yourself balance out. And he seemed pretty eager about it. He was very happy with the reading, and I seemed to answer the questions that he had. So that was my recommendation to him, was to pay more attention to people, don't get sucked in, keep meditating, keep doing the things he needs to do, you know, to keep himself connected to that Neptune in a healthier way.
Yeah.
That's the healthy side of Neptune, you know. That make sense? Or
Yeah, it does. I had one more question.
Sure.
Did you look into when his Mercury went direct, or did it go direct yet?
No, I didn't. If I did, I'm sorry, I did this a little while ago. I don't think I noticed that, his progressions when they went in. It certainly would have been interesting, because if it went direct and it would come back into Pisces, maybe that it might even have been part of his issue. Because if his Mercury goes into Pisces, maybe in his 20s or 30s, then the empathy, interior empathy becomes more, but he still hasn't learned how to deal with it, because at a younger age, he's still doing the square and running away from everything. So no, I didn't research that yet. No. Any other questions or curiosities?
Anthony,
Hey, Chuck.
I enjoyed hearing how you read a chart. One simple question. How do you read retrogrades when you see them in a chart?
I do it with a bit of a grain of salt. I'm not like Chicken Little running around going, oh my God, retrograde. I I do find that they tend to work, but it's a little reverse. In the case of him with the stuff in the fourth house, that Jupiter-Uranus was going to be a little more disruptive than if it was they were both direct, because they're sort of going backwards. Mercury retrograde, I don't worry about too much. Sometimes I find retrograde planets manifest. Well, I can give an example in my chart. I have Jupiter in Gemini in my second house, retrograde. And almost all the money I make, I was an art director for a long time, was fixing other people's jobs that got screwed up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The design would come in and, oh no, we have to strip this out and we have to change this. And I would come in and fix it. So I rarely actually got to do my own designs, but retrograde, I backed into it, and made money off of it. So
Right.
I see retrograde as just an opportunity to do it in a different way. I don't think it's necessarily cursed or the kind of quality a lot of people have. So he's quite probably with the Mercury retrograde, his mind can even come up with better conclusions to stuff. It's like, and it's more open to different ideas. It's not always going to go the same direction as everybody else's. So that's kind of how I look at retrogrades. They look at where they are and what they think they'll manifest,
Thank you, Anthony.
Oh, my pleasure. And any other questions? Okay. I hear somebody.
Okay, we are coming pretty much to the close of the meeting, unless someone has one other quick question.
Okay.
Okay, I guess not.
Okay. I'll be doing more of these in the future, by the way, with different charts, just to show different ways to get in. So keep an eye out.
Great. Thank you very much.
No, my pleasure.
Everyone, let's thank Anthony Picco for such a wonderful meeting.
Thank you, Anthony. That was very helpful.
I'm
Yes,
glad.
thank you.
It's a lot of fun. It's a nice system to get in with. And then, of course, I do want to mention, you can always keep digging around the chart for more stuff, but this gets you right to the heart of the chart. I use this a lot when I'm doing like psychic fairs where I have 20 minutes to do a chart. Bam, 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 and I got the person. It's not an in-depth reading, but then the astrologer has to take it further. That's all. So thank you very much.
Everyone. Thanks much, and we will see you all at the next meeting. Everyone, you'll just go ahead and need to exit.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.